one great story about Tony Tony went to the printer. He finally got excited about this whole book idea and what he could share, and so he goes off to the printer. It's outside Indianapolis, and he drives over, and the book is coming off the press, and he's just terrified. He sees his face coming off, and he said, "These are going to all be in my garage." And it's coming off the press, but when he arrived, they checked his ID. They gave him a wristband. Now, this is something and we're post 9/11. On the book tour, he had ended up packing his, and Tony's the most organized guy, as you might imagine. He packed his, after we went to the ESPYs and the after party and all that, and he packed his ID in his suitcase. So we arrived at LAX, he's got no ID, and we literally held up his book, Quiet Strength, and said, "This is clearly him." And they let him through, unbelievably. But we go through, Tony gets to the publisher, and they check his ID, and they're looking at it, and they put a wristband on him, and he was accompanied by a security guard the whole way through as he sees his book being printed. And Tony said, "My gosh," he said, I hate to kind of he told me later he didn't want to get a big head, but, this is pretty impressive security for a book being printed. And Tony finally said to the security guard, "You probably don't do this with every tour, do you?" And the guy said, "No, absolutely not, Coach. In fact, it's only this tour for you today." And Tony said, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And the guy said, "Yeah, on the other side of the planet, we're printing Harry Potter's 7th book, and I'm not allowed to let you anywhere near that." So things work out well at times, but a lot of times they don't. And God promises, though, whether it's commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed, or it may be, as Paul says in his second letter to the Corinthians. Paul says also, "We are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed. We are hunted down. We get knocked down. But we are not destroyed. Through suffering, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus, so the life of Jesus may be seen in our bodies." Paul went through a lot, person after person in the Bible. And I know Todd's going to be sharing over the next few weeks, but it happens over and over, whether it's Joseph and being sold into slavery rather than being killed. Gosh, thanks. Or David. I love David. Kept messing up, doing it, and shooting himself in the foot over and over. And yet he was a man after God's own heart. Or, Isaiah talks about Jesus himself, a man of many sorrows. And we saw, just last week, all that he went through. So I would say keep pushing, that we never know where things are headed. And so keep pushing, even when the jokes don't seem so funny, that you poke at yourself or other people poke at you when you're not able to get your book done or whatever. And so I share this story that happened to me right after Quiet Strength came out. So the book's at, week 16 on the New York Times list, and I went up to Boston to speak, and one of my law school friends was there, and I spoke on adversity and commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed. And I said, it doesn't talk about timing. It just says that there will. So God's timing is not our timing, and success will come. And anyway, it was a killer talk. So my law school buddy takes me aside at the end, and he says, "Nathan, that was awesome. Great job, really great the way you kind of brought it home." And he said, "I loved everything about it, with the one exception of just kind of your general premise." And he said, "The reality is I watched you for 3 years when nothing was working out." And he said, "There's no way that wasn't what you were supposed to be doing. And the fact that the world has come along now and people have managed to buy the book and are patting you on the back, that doesn't make what you've done any less God's call than when you were following that path for 3 years and nobody wanted anything to do with Nathan Whitaker on leadership." And he said, "The reality is when you're living the faithful life and you're trying to be significant, that's what God asks. And the fact the world came along and patted you on the back, well, great, but who cares?" And he's exactly right. That some of us have large platforms, some small, but God wants us to impact lives, and that's why we need to push through, and that's why God's with us, and that's why God's pulling for us, even when times